So hello everyone, I'm Sara. I'm a PhD researcher from Queen Mary University of London in the UK. Today I'm presenting a joint work with my co-authors Mike Cook and Simon Colton on AI-driven sonification of automatically designed games. Just wanted to mention that I'm recovering from the flu, so apologies for my voice a little hard to hear if I have to mute myself. Okay, so sonification is the act of using sound or music to convey non-oral information. This includes soundtracks and sound design. Automated game design is the science and engineering of AI systems to model, participate in, or support the game design process. This includes tools that help users explore design work, models of game design theories, and systems which design games autonomously. In this paper, we present the result of 3 sonification experiments working with the automated game design PUC, which is created by Mike Cook. And we consider different ways in which information about a game can be sonified. Some related work in this area includes Sonified and Sonation. Sonified creates additional oral cues for games to increase accessibility for visually impaired players, while Sonation blends level architecture and audio, choosing and mixing sound to create frightening soundscapes of levels. Audio-only games are another important example of related work. These type of games can be designed to be played through movement, or they can be games that are designed with visually impaired users in mind. Okay, before we explain our contribution, I'm going to talk a bit about PUC. PUC is an automated game designer, so it's an AI that designs games. The aim of the project is to build an AI that can act like a game designer, making games and helping others make them. Music is a very important part of game design, as it helps create an atmosphere within the game world, and it also conveys information about the game and the story. We thought that as an automated game designer, PUC should also be able to explore music. Mike is actually giving a talk on Friday about PUC, so please go watch his talk if you want to know more about it. As we mentioned, sonification is the use of sound to convey information. This can be information about the characters and the story, information about different locations in the map, or different textual levels, and so on. We started by asking ourselves what other types of data can be sonified. For example, could game soundtracks use game data to create an emotional atmosphere for the audience? This then led us to ask if game soundtracks could reveal information such as the balance of power during the game, or maybe even help players feel, or well, hear who has the advantage. We explored these questions using PUC to gather game data, and we applied different approaches to sonify PUC's games. The first approach we implemented is the sequencer-based sonification. We built a system that continually produces music sonifying the overall game state, treating PUC's game board as a one-track sequencer. This was actually inspired by grid-based MIDI controllers, such as the Innovation Launchpad. When the sequencer head reaches a new board position, if there is a game piece in that location, it plays a sample. As shown on the screenshot on the right, we can see the game board and the yellow tile, which indicates the sequencer current position. We also added an ambient backing track to support the sequencer so that we would have multiple layers of sounds, creating an interesting soundtrack. The implementation of this strategy was actually the easiest out of the 3 approaches we applied. This is because it requires no contextual information about the game. This also means that it can be implemented in any game, but some games suit it better than others. PUC's game Antitrust suited the sonification strategies as it has a small board size and sparse piece coverage, making the sequencer output quite atmospheric. The prototype had 2 effects. Firstly, the music has a subtle impact on the play choices, encouraging the player to avoid grouping too many pieces in a small area and filling in gaps where no sound were produced. In the game Antitrust, the objective is to control an area. Using the sonification strategy meant that the output of the sequencer indicates which player is winning. In a second sonification strategy, we use heuristic functions that measure properties of the game's flow and progress to change an ambient soundtrack. We define a progress heuristic as a simple measurement of a game's proximity to an end state. We then tie the progress heuristic for the current game to the background sound, such as to drive the BPM of the background track. The BPM will increase as the game nears completion, and it updates every time a player makes a move. This will give the player a sense of how close the game is to completion, and increasing BPM can also convey a sense of tension. The third and final strategy makes use of Neo-Riemannian theory, or NRT for short. NRT is a branch of transformational theory created by Lewin in 1987. It is an analytical tool for musical passages that use chromatic triadicism and cannot therefore be easily analyzed using conventional music theory tools. NRT relates chords that share one or two notes. It maps a major triad to a minor triad and vice versa using 5 operators, or what we call NRO for short. Each operator fixes 1 or 2 notes of the chord and changes the rest. While NRO are moves of just one operator and describe a single chord change, compound NROs are moves which use more than one operator sequentially. Combination of the PLR operators can describe any possible relation between triads, making it an incredibly useful tool for soundtrack analysis. Frank Lehman also observed that transformations using NROs can be directly linked to emotions and situations on screen. So here's a small visual example of how NRT works. So the red dots represent the initial chord. In this case, it's C major with the notes C, E, G. And the blue dots represent the new chord after using the L operator. We can see that 2 of the notes remain the same, and the C goes down to a B, making the new chord an E minor chord. Here's another quick example of how NRT works and how it's used to analyze a soundtrack. This is an analysis of the musical cue Playing a Game of Go by Horner from the movie A Beautiful Mind. In the scene, the genius mathematician Joe Nash is playing a game of Go against one of his rivals. While he's playing the game, he thinks he's winning. The soundtrack plays beautiful passages to symbolize his genius and the raising tension of the game using the NRO operators S, L, and LR, as you can see under the first chord of the cue. To Nash's surprises, he loses. This coincides with an LPL move, and the mood of the music changes completely to a dark sound as the rival say, what if you lose? This is a good example that shows how well NRT can describe what is happening on screen. So our previous contribution was to propose procedural NRT to be implemented in a generative music system. We rationalize NRT in terms of a set of conditional rewrite rules. More specifically, there are 2 sets of rewrite rules, conditional on whether we start on a major or a minor chord. At the bottom, we can see an example of a chord sequence created using NROs, where LPR are the operators, and I is an additional step to permute the trichord inversion to the prime form in root position, allowing the NROs to be applied correctly. We found that varying the length of the NRO sequence can be used as an indication of the strength of emotional or situational change on screen. For instance, short sequences tend to sound more familiar, while long sequences of compound NROs tend to sound more alien and jarring. Additionally, we also propose that sequences of chords can be constructed to follow the emotional and situational requirements of a given scene or cutscene in a film or game, or even to react live to play actions in game. This presents the potential of using NRT to be implemented into a generative system. So for this strategy, we made use of game events as triggers for changes in the generative soundtrack. We give a ranking to each player move, and we sonify significant moves, either good or bad, that are played throughout the game. To apply this approach, we created a tool that we called GenRT for generative NRT that implements the generative rationalization shown on the right in order to provide emotional adaptation of the music based on the quality of the move made by the player. So we expanded the rationalization by creating rewrite rules for suspended and augmented chord types and adding them to the GenRT tool together with the original rules. This allows for a broader and richer collection of emotional music to be generated, as we now have 5 different chord types. GenRT allows both planned, scripted, and dynamic music generation using NRT operators, which means it can actually be used to generate background music for videos using a cue sheet, but it can also respond with dynamic music to accompany live gameplay. It can also produce various styles of music as the user can control instrumentation, tempo, and rhythm. It also allows to control aspects of the chord changes allowed by generative NRT, such as the length of the compound transform, the type of the transform with the emotion associated to it based on Lehman's findings. It is also able to create voice-led melodies for the chord sequence. Voice leading is the way in which individual voices move from chord to chord. The best voice leading occurs when all individual voices move smoothly and there are no big jumps between notes of the melody. In GNRT, this is achieved using compositional techniques such as jazz guide tones, which are the most harmonically important notes of a chord. This is because they determine the quality of the chord, so whether a chord is minor, major, augmented, and so on. We create voice-led melodies by using and connecting the guide tones of chords in the sequence. Finally, GNRT can produce music in a series of episodes, and the user can choose different specification for each episode, allowing for variety within the composition. So I'm going to try and show you a demo, and let me know if it works. Can you hear it? Okay. So future work. Future work includes the development of a system that is able to understand what would be an appropriate sonification strategy for a given game, taking into account design choices. We also plan to empower automated game designers to create games with a sonification first approach. For instance, designing a game whose output is more harmonious. We are interested in the sonification of automated game design process. So the process that an AI goes through when creating a game. This would allow the sonification of the game designer's ideas, both bad and good. We also plan to investigate sonification of the player experience in more complex 3D open world adventure games. At this moment, generative work is very, very early days. So we plan to continue to develop it to ensure that it produces high levels of musicality and diversity. We also plan to make GNRT available as a plugin for a game engine such as Unity or Unreal once it's a bit more developed. And that's all for me. Thank you for listening. And do you have any questions?